Hi everyone, my name is Junon. I have a health science background and I'm the author of the book Truth and Empathy, How to Find Your Soulmate. And I'll put a link to the book below. This video is about the difference between intuitives and sensors in the MBTI, or the conceptualist and the realist in the Truth and Empathy questionnaire. Now, I know this question is very controversial because a lot of people in a number of forums are going back and forth, knowing who's really using intuition to gather information versus who are using their five senses. So I trust that this video can help clarify some of this confusion. The first concept to understand when it comes to personality type, there are 16 of them. 8 are intuitives and 8 are sensors. And that's where the confusion starts. Because if you look at the intuitives, essentially the functions are the same. The only difference is that the N, the intuitive function, has been substituted by an S to get the sensor version. And if, let's say, someone reads, for example, the description of an ENFJ, they could easily believe that it's their personality type when it's essentially the ESFJ that may be the correct one. So again, unless someone can really go into sort of subtleties and understand those nuances, it's easy to be confused by that. Especially, I think that a lot of people want to be perceived as an intuitive, so they're more likely to make this myth of thinking that they are intuitive when they are sensors. There are more people who are in fact sensors who believe they're intuitives versus people who are truly intuitives who believe they are sensors. And I came across some interesting information in the past several years before I could make this video. First is that I started meditating years ago, so I've been meditating for more than 27 years, almost 28 years now. And so I went regularly to my meditation center, and then they bought an EEG machine to look at people's brain waves. One thing that I've noticed is that regardless of how many years someone had been meditating, uh, their brainwave dominance could not be predicted based on how many hours they've been meditating. So it seems that a person's brainwave dominance is something that is set from birth. Can the person change over time? Yes, but it takes longer than meditating 20 minutes twice a day. It will take a lot more training to change a person's brain type. And also, I read the book by David R. Hawkins. He's a spiritual teacher and also a psychiatrist. And in his book, The Eye of the I, in 3 parts of the book, he talks about the fact that people's brainwave dominance are different. So you have people who have beta brainwave dominance, which is most people. Then some have alpha and some have theta brainwave dominance. So that sort of, then I start connecting the dots. The other aspect is that if you look at most medical textbooks, they will tell you that the vast majority of people have a beta brain dominance in their day-to-day life. So when people are about, doing their business, they're awake, they have a beta brain dominance. So that, I would say that if you look at the percentages, probably at least 85% of our population have a beta brainwave dominance. I mean, they produce other types of brainwaves as well, like alpha and theta, but beta is their dominant one. Now, what is kind of interesting when it comes to this topic is that a person's brainwave dominance will determine their resting breathing rate. So the average human being breathes about 15 times a minute. And the difference between, let's say, an intuitive and a sensor is that if an intuitive breathes 15 times a minute, they will report feeling stressed. So probably they have, maybe anxiety. They might say that they can't fall asleep. They feel unwell in their bodies. They might have GI issues. So there is a difference in terms of the physiology of someone who's a sensor versus an intuitive. An intuitive needs to breathe 11 times a minute or less. So this is their corrected one, because most people obviously hyperventilate because of stress, but their truest rate is actually less than 12 breaths per minute. So already there is some physical markers between sensors versus intuitives. The other aspect when it comes to an intuitive versus sensor is that it has to do with the 80-20 rule. Do you mostly use intuition to gather information, or do you mostly use your five senses? So do you need data? Like, do you have to gather information to make decisions? So obviously, when we talk about sensors versus intuitive, we talk about how you receive information. In a number of, let's say, forums, and even I've watched videos about that, this explain that intuition has to do with pattern recognition. The issue is that the world is orderly. So if you study just about any field, you will see a pattern. So it's not by accident, let's say, even like, there are 24 hours in a day and 360 days in a year. And if, let's say, if you work, let's say, in dentistry, so what most people at a certain age will have cavities. I mean, there are patterns that are everywhere. But the issue with thinking that intuition has to do with pattern recognition is that intuition has to do with recognizing the exception, not the rule. So let's say if you go to your bank, or if you have an insurance company, these are institutions that are very much sensors, because they need past records to predict the future. But they could be wrong, because that pattern may not be correct, because there could be an exception to the rule that you will not pick up if you're not an intuitive. Now, the intuitive, the way it works is that they just get a download of information. So it's not so much that their subconscious mind, sort of like gathers information, works on it, and also to get an aha moment. When you actually talk to intuitives, the way it works is that, and it has to do with their brain wave, how it's designed, in the sense that with slower brain waves, is that you start picking up subtleties in the environment. So there's information there for everyone. It's like if you take an intuitive and they have a particular personality type or brain type, regardless of which environment they grew up in, they come to the same conclusion. And if, let's say, you need to gather data from the environment to, come up with a solution or an understanding of a subject, well, if the information that you're exposed to is different, then your conclusion would also be different. But it's not the way it works when it comes to intuition. They come to the same realization regardless of what they were exposed to. And it has to do with the fact that this information that we're talking about, this subtle sort of like data that is available, is more of a download than anything else. Now, if you look at, let's say, master yogis, and you look at how their brains are wired, they are right brain dominant, and they have slow brain waves. And when you look at, let's say, the MBTI, the intuitive thinkers versus the intuitive feelers, intuitive thinkers essentially are left brain dominant and have slow brain waves. The intuitive feelers have a right brain dominance, and they have slow brain. So you realize that this aspect of having slow coherent brainwaves is what differentiates sensors versus intuitives. And interesting enough, let's say if you look at the master yogis, and most of them obviously meditate, you can take a sensor, and over time their brains can become like that of an intuitive. But it's not something that happens easily. So if, let's say, someone decides to meditate 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for 20 years, you will see over time that their brains are becoming more like slower and more coherent, especially when we look at the prefrontal lobes, and they're becoming more right brain dominant. Therefore, people who are intuitive feelers have an easier time meditating. The personality types that have the most difficulty getting to a meditative state are the people who have left brain dominance and have fast beta brain waves. So let's say like an ISTJ or an ESTJ, they'll probably have the hardest time getting into a meditative state. So I know this was a lot of information, but I think this is really important to actually discuss. So again, when it comes to personality types, it's not by accident. You have to look at the brainwave dominance. They will determine a person's resting breathing rate and other sort of characteristics in terms of how they can gather information and what they're able to perceive. So I trust that this information was eye-opening, interesting. If you enjoyed it, please click on the like button, subscribe to my channel, and we will talk soon.